Hey everybody, this is Wajahat Ali with my better half, Dr. Sarah Qureshi, who is a family medicine physician at MedStar Georgetown, also an assistant professor. She went to Mayo Clinic and she also went to Harvard and UCSF. I don't know, it's gross. Her resume is really big. But we did this at the beginning of the pandemic where we took some of your questions and Sarah answered several of them. And right now we have the good news of a vaccine. So, Dr. Sarah, are these vaccines safe?
Okay. Well, I first want to start with that any thing I speak about today or these views are my own and they're not representative of my employer. Are these vaccines safe? We've been getting patients in our clinics asking questions about this, or friends and family asking questions. Before I talk about safety, I will start with yes, they are safe based on what we know so far. But I want to start with how they work because I think it's important for everyone, not just physicians or healthcare professionals, to understand the basics of how these specific vaccines work. So in other vaccines, sometimes you have a weaker strain of the virus or a dead part of the virus that's a small part that's inserted in our body, and then we get an immune response.
It's like the flu vaccine.
The flu vaccine, exactly. But COVID vaccines, the two that we have authorization for right now, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, they both work similarly. What they use is something called mRNA, which is a genetic component. It's a small piece. Our cells use mRNA all the time. But what they've done is these brilliant scientists have sequenced from the spike protein. I've seen pictures of the coronavirus with the little spikes. So what they've done is sequenced the same sequence of those little spike proteins. So the mRNA is basically a small piece of it is injected in our arm, and then that tells our cells to make our cells in our body, basically programs them to make just the spike protein in our body. And then our body thinks that it's the virus because it sees the spike protein, and it starts the whole immune system reaction to it. So there is no component of the virus that is being injected in our body. It's just this mRNA that is then telling our cells to make the spike protein. Second point, this genetic material, mRNA, does not change our DNA, our mRNA in our body. It doesn't. Some people are like, oh, is the government trying to do something? No, this doesn't change any other part of our genetic makeup in our body.
So you will not be controlled by Bill Gates or anyone from the deep state once you take this vaccine?
No, and we laugh about it, but really some people think so, but absolutely not. So this is new. It is newer science, meaning we haven't had other vaccines that have used this, but I think looking in the future, we will have more vaccines that will use mRNA components. Now, I want to say a few things about the safety. So now that we talked about how it works, these vaccines, it's not, we keep hearing about how everything was rushed. Because it was rushed, it does not mean that they skipped any safety steps. Both these companies, all the trials had to go through every single one of the steps that other vaccine trials have had to go through. It was just done through in a quicker way. And the reason it was able to be done is because a lot of money went into it. And they're already producing the vaccines as the trials were going on. But what I want to say is with Pfizer, I'll give you a breakdown of both of them. So it's not like they tested this just on a few people. Pfizer had about 44,000 people enrolled in their study. Moderna had about 30,000 people. What they did for each of these studies, very similar. 50% of the participants did not get anything. They got a shot with just saline in it. The other 50% actually got the vaccine. And they followed these people over the next 2 to 3 months. And what they found in both of these vaccines, I'll start with Pfizer. It's 2 shots. You get 1 shot and then another shot 3 weeks later. In Moderna, it's 1 shot and then you get the other shot 4 weeks later. So it's a little different in that way. They found that after the first shot, the vaccine was about 50% effective. And those who received the vaccine in terms of, starting to make antibodies. But after the second shot, roughly about 7 days after the second shot, 95% effectiveness. And what that means is...
For both?
Yeah, 94% for Pfizer, 95% for Moderna. So I'll say about 95%. But what I want to say is these vaccines, when we use those percentages, maybe you think about the flu vaccine. I mean, this is almost like flu vaccine in different years is much, much lower, right? Like 40 to 60%. So what we're finding is these vaccines are very effective. Now, what that meant is when I give you those numbers is in the trial that they followed, about 170 of those 44,000 in the Pfizer trial basically ended up getting COVID symptoms and then testing positive for COVID. Out of those, there was only about 5 or 6 who were from the vaccine, and the other 164
From the placebo.
were from placebo.
Wow.
So that's where those numbers come from. That's where you get the 94% effectiveness, and similar in Moderna. So that's a huge number.
So 94 out of 100 were basically protected from
basically.
COVID, which is amazing.
Yeah. So that's one way to look at it.
We hope for 100, but if you could get 94, 95, especially with the death rates right now, that's a win.
Oh my God, it's huge. It's huge. And that, I just talked about the effectiveness, but Waj, you asked about the safety. Do you want me to answer that?
Well, the question I want to ask is, look, if I'm listening to you right now with all the disinformation going, and just maybe just natural concerns, you're a physician. You've said all this for the past 5 minutes. That's fantastic. Will you, Dr. Sarah, take the vaccine?
Yes, absolutely. And guess what? I just got a text that I will be able to get the vaccine today or tomorrow.
So at least one of the Alis has a potential for long-term success. The better half. That's good. Remember me well, Sarah. Remember me well.
I'm fortunate. I mean, they're in the rollout. They're first doing healthcare professionals and also residents living in long-term care facilities. Hopefully, in the second part, they'll be looking at frontline essential workers because they're just at risk. Those who have been risking their lives to be.
Oh, you mean like people like Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell?
Absolutely, and
Marco Rubio.
Absolutely not. That's mind-blowing that they're able to get it before some of all our frontline essential workers are. I'm talking about like the janitors in the hospitals. I'm talking about the pharmacists. I'm talking about, all these other people or the grocery store workers. But one thing I do want to make a note about safety. So I said I will absolutely get it. And I want to explain about safety why. On some of my Facebook feeds, my friends who are more skeptical of vaccines are writing things like, oh, I read about Bell's palsy in participants and the anaphylactic reactions. So
also anti-vaxxers.
And I think many of these people are anti-vaxxers who are playing on some of these reports without understanding the numbers and the significance of any of these things. So I'll start with, there's a difference between side effects and adverse reactions. So in medicine, side effects are like when you take a medicine or take a vaccine, side effects are normal things that are pretty much expected to happen. They're not comfortable, but they're not life-threatening, and they happen. So side effects that are expected that they saw in the trials of these 70,000, if you combine the two, 70,000 participants, and more so common after the second shot, these side effects were a pain at the injection site, sometimes a little bit of swelling, fatigue, headache, sometimes low-grade fevers. So those are normal and expected, and it's almost like your body's doing its job because your immune system is revving up and it's working. Those are side effects. Expected. You should know that after the first dose, you might get those. Please understand those are normal and you should still go.
It's like when people get some of the flu shots.
Yeah, exactly. So
sometimes the arm is swollen, sometimes it hurts a little bit, sometimes people get down.
Exactly. So it's similar to that.
Yeah.
Or like with certain medications, we know some medications can make you a little sedated or tired.
But that's normal.
That's normal.
Yeah.
Adverse events, and this is what they followed in the trials, and they're going to continue to follow. We're still getting data. They're going to continue to follow all the participants for the next 2 years. Adverse events are events that we'd not expect to happen, and they can be a little bit more serious. So in this study, they had about 3, I don't know if this, I'm trying to remember if this was, I think it was the Pfizer one, 3 out of the 4 out of the 44,000 who got Bell's palsy, which is basically like a condition where your facial nerve is affected. Viruses can cause it, other things can cause it. And what it does is that facial nerve doesn't work anymore. So you get drooping of, one side of the face and whatnot. So 4 out of the 44,000 got it. And these are what disinformation has been taking those numbers and saying, oh, the vaccine can cause this. If you look at the numbers, 3 out of those 4 were from the placebo group. 1 was out of the vaccine group. And the other one, it might have been reversed. But either way, the bottom line is the numbers are less prevalent. Like if you just look at the general population, the rate of Bell's palsy is higher than what we saw in our participants. So the bottom line is that is not where there's no significance in saying the vaccine caused that. Absolutely not. But it is something we're going to continue to look for. We're not, absolutely ruling it out. We're going to continue to monitor people as they get vaccinated and see what happens. The other one is anaphylactic reaction, and that's when your body basically, this can happen with vaccines, with medications, with foods. Your body goes into a really dangerous reaction where sometimes you get throat swelling, lip swelling, you can't breathe. That's very serious. They did not see that in any of the trials, but there are reports of 2 healthcare workers in the UK who had anaphylactic reactions to the vaccines, and then a few more that came out of Seattle and a few more here in the US. they're the ones from the UK that we know that those participants had prior severe like food or medication allergies. With the US ones, a few of them didn't. The bottom line is, again, there's no direct association, and we're telling those who have a history of some type of food or medication allergy to be watched a little closer, but we're not saying not to get the vaccine because we don't have a correlation yet.
So bottom line, you would say the vaccines that you have identified, the one by Pfizer and the one by Moderna, are safe.
Yes.
You would recommend people take them.
They, as far as what we know with the trials that have been done so far, what we followed out, absolutely. And they're safe, especially when you compare it to what COVID does and what we've seen. Like there's still some theoretical risk that some people might bring up with the vaccines. Those are all theoretical. Look at what we know about COVID and how it devastates the body. Even for those patients who don't die from COVID, so many are still dealing with chronic cough, chronic fatigue, other effects of COVID. So yes.
And this includes, by the way, young people. Oftentimes people have this misunderstanding that it's only those who are elderly or those who have pre-existing conditions. But you were telling me that you have seen young patients, people who are healthy, people don't have these pre-existing conditions who have basically been suffering from these long-term consequences of COVID.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I just cringe every time I hear. Or I just read a report recently about the Republican who was the email chain that was going around saying, "Oh, let's just let them all get it. Let all the young people herd immunity, let them get it," because not even thinking about the devastating consequences of how this has affected just function and daily life and whatnot.
So just to wrap this up, we're going on 12 minutes, and thank you everyone for watching, and pardon us for our makeshift studio. We're doing this from our Honda Odyssey minivan, which is the greatest place to be in 2020 during lockdowns, because we have 3 rugrats right behind Sarah in that house who absolutely make sure that we could not do this without them interfering or interrupting with their cuteness. But you mentioned the devastating consequences of COVID, and we have a lot of questions here still about people saying, hey, so, if I get symptoms, is it okay for me to come back after 7 days? Do I wait 10 days? Do I wait 14 days? Where are we at right now? And what would you recommend people do to stay safe, especially as we're rounding the corner to the new year? There's going to be New Year's Eve's parties. There's Christmas about 2 days away. What is your recommendation for people watching right now to be as safe as possible, to keep themselves safe and also their loved ones safe?
That's such a good question. Before I get to that, can I say one last thing?
You can say whatever you want. This is your video.
I'm going to get to that, but I wanted to say one thing about the trials and the ages, since we were talking about younger people. So for the Pfizer trial, or the Pfizer vaccine has been approved for 16 years and older. So I just want to make that clear. There's still ongoing studies on children 12 and older. We're still collecting that data, getting those results. FDA approved under emergency use authorization for 16 and older, the Moderna vaccine for 18 years and older. It was not trialed in breastfeeding or pregnant women, although there were some women in the trial who got pregnant as they were part of the trial, and we're going to be following them. I saw there was a question in your Twitter feed, so I'll quickly address that. I think it's a discussion for those of you who are pregnant to have with your OB-GYN or your primary care doctor about that. I know some physicians who are getting it, they're pregnant and they're getting it. It's an informed decision. It hasn't been approved, but you can get it. Theoretically, or at least in the animal models, we haven't seen anything. But so I read something from a physician yesterday in a group I'm in where she's like 6 weeks pregnant, and her OB was like, let's just wait a little bit longer until you're out of first trimester. And I am still breastfeeding, and I'm going to be getting it, understanding, some of the risks. So I just wanted to bring that in. So now I can get to your next question.
Please.
Okay. So bottom line is, we still recommend the vaccine even if you've had COVID before. I want to say that because there's no way we can test everybody for antibodies. We're just saying everybody should get the vaccine. It's too hard to go ahead and check everybody. Second thing is, if you've had COVID, yes, likely you've developed antibodies. What we've seen is they last about 3 months, maybe up to 6 months with declining levels. There's no guarantee. So yeah, for the holidays, please, if there's one thing I can say is, if there's a way for you to be patient for a little bit longer and do not travel and do not gather, please do that. Because right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. We are seeing the highest numbers this week, and that's as a result of all the Thanksgiving travel. We knew it would take weeks for the numbers to get to where they are now, and this is what we expected. It's horrible. Hospitals are running out of capacity, running out of beds. We're back to where we were in April, but even worse now. The numbers are much worse now. So, and I know we do have more testing, but we're again seeing a spike. So I implore you to please skip this year for gatherings. Even if you get tested, if you were tested a little bit too early, like let's say you got exposed one day and then you're going to travel, and like 2 days later, you're like, oh, I'll get tested before I travel. And you still don't have any symptoms and your test is negative, and then you think you're safe, and then you either don't develop symptoms or your COVID, it incubates. It takes 14 days. You could be traveling and spreading it to people in other places. So the bottom line is, if it's not essential, do not travel. Do a Zoom Christmas if possible. Celebrate it a little bit, later, a few months later. Whatever you can do, this is to protect you, your families, your communities. We've seen cases of this time and time again where there's one family member who was like, oh, I just wanted to travel, and basically got all the other family members infected. Unclear whether or not they caught it during traveling. But the bottom line is there's a risk. There is a risk, and you'll be exposing people. So I don't know if I answered that enough, but please, use the same precautions you were using early in the pandemic right now, especially during holiday season with so many not following the recommendations.
So you're recommending not doing the world's worst karaoke party like Matt Gaetz from your home state of Florida?
Gosh, so Florida's always embarrassing me in so many ways, but it makes me really sad. But no, absolutely not. Just if it's not essential, don't do it. Protect your family. Save them now so that you can have next year, hopefully, where you can celebrate, and you can celebrate big in some way or another. But again, I saw one of the questions says, oh, if we've had COVID and we just had it in October, is it safe for us to gather together? No, it's still not safe. We still don't know. I mean, we still don't know. Even if you have antibodies, it doesn't mean first of all, it depends on who you're going to be with. It depends on prevalence rates and the town that you might be going to. It depends on a lot of factors, but the best answer is I would still avoid it right now. And especially with high risk people.
We know people who have gotten COVID earlier on and then they got COVID again. So just because you've had COVID once, doesn't mean you'll never get it again?
Yeah, no, absolutely not, because, I'm sure you've heard about the mutating strain that they found in the UK, I think also in South Africa. And a word about that, the health professionals and those who are specialists in this, who know a lot more than myself, are saying pretty much that it would have to take a more severe mutation for the vaccine not to be effective. So we're still at this point saying, listen, the vaccines will still be effective if there are small mutations in the strain. Because again, that spike protein, most of it is pretty similar, even if you might have mutations in different parts of the virus, or even a small mutation in the spike protein. So still, get the vaccine, and it should be effective for that. But secondly, we don't know what strains are traveling. What I was reading very recently was that strain in the UK most likely is already in the US. They think it's a little bit more aggressive of a strain and that it can spread a little bit quicker or easier. And this is normal with viruses. Over time, viruses mutate. This is the natural life cycle of viruses. So this is expected. So the best thing we can do is, we're still in the pandemic, continue to be cautious, socially isolate, wear your mask. Even though I'm getting the vaccine, I'm going to get my first dose hopefully today or tomorrow, and then I don't know which one it is, but then again 3 or 4 weeks later, I still have to continue to wear my mask and socially isolate unless absolutely necessary.
So you socially isolate or social distance?
Sorry, thank you for clarifying. Well, it's not isolate, socially distance. But I say isolate because we really, besides work and home, we don't really do anything else. But yeah, socially or physically distance, because even with the vaccine, it takes time to be effective for each individual person, and then we need more people to get vaccinated. And I think the number is 70% in terms of herd immunity through the vaccine. But I think a lot of people think, once we get the vaccine, then we can stop masking and stop socially distancing, and that's not true. We want to tell all our patients, all of you, we have to continue doing that for now.
So we're at the 20-minute mark. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarah Qureshi, for taking the time. I look forward to you at least having the vaccine, and maybe one day the rest of us can as well. If these videos were helpful, we'll make another one. And thank you to Dr. Sarah for her time. And she looks so pretty today.
Thank you, Watch, and thank you especially to all our frontline healthcare workers, essential workers, and everybody who's been working so hard to fight against this pandemic, save lives in so many different ways, especially with all the disinformation out there and the people who are just making it so much harder. So thank you to all our heroes.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Love your loved ones if you can responsibly. Happy holidays to everybody, and hopefully next year we have a better story to share.